welcome back to building a web application from scratch. My name is Matt. In this video, we're going to be setting up our NestJS server. So if you remember from the previous videos and articles, it's all been kind of project management up until this point, defining our MVP, breaking down our project into epics and tasks. So this is kind of our first dive in actually doing some coding. So an exciting little step there to be able to actually kind of dive into the meat of the project. So let's go ahead and get rolling. If you're following along in a project management software, go ahead and open your card. If not, no big deal. You can just kind of gloss over this piece. But opening up our card, we're going to go ahead and see we got the NestJS server needs to be set up, connected to Atlas MongoDB database, along with health check API to ensure that the server's up and running correctly. Hitting that health check API, we can ensure that the request can be made to check the health of the server. Additionally, environment variables should be created for dev, staging, and production environments. So we got some subtasks here. Create our NestJS server with environments, connecting the server to Atlas MongoDB, creating that health check API. So we're probably not going to tackle all this in this video, but let's go ahead and start with this first one, creating the NestJS server with our environment variables in our environments. So let's go ahead and move this over to in progress. And let's mark the time, 12:28, just in case we want to log some hours. We'll see if we do that or not, but let's go ahead and just note it. Let's go ahead and open up our IDE. I'm using Cursor, but if you can use whatever you'd like, as we mentioned, but I just want to demonstrate kind of how some of these AI tools can start to be leveraged when building this stuff correctly. So the first thing when I'm creating any backend server or starting a new project is I like to create a folder and call it backend, just to have a directory that holds all the backend code, right? Not just our server, but if we have, Python scripts or whatever it may be, right? I just like to put that all into a backend directory. And then inside of here, let's go ahead and cd into that backend. We're going to go ahead and install our NestJS CLI. So we're going to run npm install. We're going to install it globally. And we're going to say at NestJS CLI. We're going to head and install that. And that's going to allow us to install NestJS on our computer. Once that's done, what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to create our project. So we're in our backend. You want to make sure you're in that backend directory. I'm going to say nest new and what we want to call our server, our application. So we're going to call it nest server, just to indicate that this is our NestJS server here. And we're going to let that install. We're going to say npm as our package manager. Alrighty, and we got a couple more things we want to install. So first thing, let's cd into that nest server. If you come up here, you can view our project here. So in there, now we're going to say npm install at NestJS and say config. And that's going to allow us to handle our environment variables efficiently. And then it's going to pair with the next package, which is going to be joy, npm install JOI. So that's going to install. So good. We've got that. Now we're kind of set up to start. And let's go ahead and create these environment variables. So in our parent directory, our nest server directory, we're going to create a new folder and we're going to call it environments. And inside there, we're going to create, oops, not a new folder. We're going to create a new file. And we're going to call this .m.development. We're going to create another one called .m.staging. And another one for production, m.production. So this is where we're going to have all of our different environment variables for our different environments. So we're going to start like saying node environment. This is, we're in production right now. Actually, let's start with development. Node environment equals development. And then we're going to say port equals 3000. Let's go ahead and save that, copy it, come to staging, paste it, update this to say staging. And we're going to change our port to 8080 because that's the default for HTTPS. And then we're going to go to production and post that again. Leave port 8080, but then update this to production and save. So make sure those are all saved. Okay, environment's created with our environment variables. Now we're ready to start configuring our application, how it's going to start. So we're going to go expand the source directory, go to our app.module, and then here we're going to import that config module we installed. We're also going to import Joy. So we got import config module for NestJS config and import asterisk's Joy from Joy. So next, let's go ahead and we're going to say const environment equals process.m.node environment. And then we're going to go ahead and give a little conditional if statement. And say node environment is not set. Because ultimately what I like to do for this is I like to say, you know, I sometimes, yeah, I love fallback values when they're relevant, but sometimes I don't want fallback values. There's certain values that were like, they have to be set as an environment variable. And I want them to be set, or otherwise I want the application to fail. The node environment, the port, the JSON web token, like there's some of these things that it's like our database connection, when we set that up, I don't want to have fallback values for those, because what happens if you're in production and the environment variable isn't set and then it falls back to the development environment, right? I don't like that, right? So I like to restrict that, saying, no, if these environment variables aren't set, fail the application, throw us an error. That way we can tell why it's failing and we don't accidentally boot up or access data that a particular environment isn't supposed to use. So now we can go down to our imports. We're going to say config module for root. We're going to say is global true. We're going to say our environment path is going to be our environment file path to our environment variable. And then we're going to say validation schema. And this is where we're going to specify some of these using Joy, saying that these have to be set. So the first thing is going to be our node environment. We're going to say node environment joy.string. So we're going to say it has to be a string. We're going to give it some valid values, saying it has to be one of these values. So we're going to say development, staging, and production, and we're going to mark it as required. Under this, we're going to say port, and we're going to say that that has to be a number and that has to be required. Right, so already you can kind of see how these AI tools are pretty helpful, right? It allowed me to quickly just press tab and go through here with some of these recommended stuff that I want. You know, I know that this is what I want, so you have to know what you're looking for, but it's very helpful, speeds up that process. So let's go ahead and save. So what this does, so we set our environment variable, we come down, we're specifying our environment file path, and we're saying we have to have a node environment and port. Otherwise, it's going to trigger a failure early on using this Joy package. And so our app won't even start, which is what we want. Okay, so once we have our app module set up, let's go ahead and go to our main.ts file. So in here, we're going to go ahead and import our config service. Let's go ahead and import this logger as well. So now we can come down and we're going to say const config app.getConfigService. Sorry. All right. So we're going to say config equals app get config service. So now we're going to say const environment equals, sorry, excuse me, const environment equals config dot get. We're going to say string because it has to be a string. It's a node environment. We're going to say port. We're not going to throw these. We're going to say await app listen at port. And we're actually going to go ahead and default this to 3000. And we're going to do that because it can't be undefined, right? And so this value can't be an undefined value. It's expecting a number. And so what we'll do is we default this to 3000. But if at this point port isn't set, that joy is already going to catch that, right? So it's already going to catch this value and fail at this point if the port isn't set. So we're allowed to do that and default down there because it's already going to catch it. And then now we're going to go ahead and say logger.log. And we're going to say service running on port and environment. And then let's go ahead and then say bootstrap as well. Save, and we should be good to go. Another thing that we're actually going to want to do is we're going to want to install cross environment. So we're going to come down now because if we're running this on Windows, so we want to make sure that everything's working on Windows. So we're going to say npm install cross environment. That's not going to work. You got to spell it right. Okay. So now to make sure that we have our commands and everything set correctly, what we're going to do is we're going to go to our package.json. And you can see in these scripts, right, that we have like what we run when we run start dev, start prod, right? We're going to update these to work with our cross environment to make sure this starts on any environment that we're running on. Right, so what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to say start is going to be nest start. We're going to say start dev is going to be cross environment node environment equals development nest start watch. So it's saying using the cross environment, using the node environment variable development, we're going to start our application in watch mode. Staging, we're not going to add watch there. We're going to say nest node dist main. Let's go ahead and remove our prod one here. Cross environment node production node dist main. Build, we want nest build, and then start, we want node dist main as well. So we have our start. We have node dist main for our start for production and staging, and that's because we're going to build before we start. So we're going to, in staging and production, we're going to build our application before we start it. So we build it, it produces our dist main, and then it's going to find those files and run them whenever we then run our start command. after our build, and that's why that's set up that way. So we're going to go ahead and save. And what we can do now is we're going to go ahead and run this. So let's go ahead and say Nest server. I'm going to say npm start dev. Sorry, npm run start dev. Okay, config port is required. So let's go ahead and look at that. Node config module 23. So we started in as saying port is required. So let's make sure development variable has a port. Let's see why it's throwing this. Let's go ahead and go into our agent and say, I am seeing this error. I have a port specified in my .env.development file. I am running nest run start dev. Let's see what it says. Oh, I made you see it. It's because this is environments. Save. So now we can see servers running on port 3000 in development mode. All right, so now let's go ahead and close this down. Let's try it in staging. Let's go ahead and try to boot up our staging. So let's go back to our JSON file. We're going to say npm run start staging. Server is running on port 8080 in staging mode. Let's go ahead and close this down, and we're going to say npm run start prod. server is running port 8080 in production mode, right? So we then confirm that all of our environments are set correctly and we're running. So you can kind of see this is why it was super helpful to set up that joy piece, right? Because if we go to production again and let's go ahead and remove this port, and let's go ahead and close this down. Let's clear it all out. Let's go to say npm run start prod again. You know, it's going to fail. That port is required. So that's exactly why we ran that stuff, right? Because it was really enabled us to come into our app module and it's like, okay, this looks correct, right? We've got our port set, we've got it required. Why isn't that working? And it's because our directory was named incorrectly, a little typo there. So we were able to diagnose that and allowed us to very easily troubleshoot why that was happening. So let's go back to our production environment variable, set the back, save. So cool. We now have a startable NestJS backend server and our different environments configured, and we've confirmed that it works for all of them. So that's all we're going to cover in this video, I think. Let's go ahead and go back to our project management software if you're following along in that. And let's go ahead and mark this particular task as completed. Click save. And we'll call it good for the day. Again, thanks for listening. I hope this was helpful, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Thanks for watching.